Hello, my name is Susan Rosenbluth. I'm the editor and publisher of the Jewish Voice and Opinion, which is based in Englewood, New Jersey. This is a monthly news magazine that goes to virtually every observant Jewish home throughout all of northern New Jersey and neighboring Rockland County and Riverdale, New York. This goes out to a population for whom Israel is extremely important, so I'm very glad to have with me right now Mr. We pronounce it Eli or Eli?
Anyway you want. Israelis call me Eli.
Eli, I would think. Mr. Eli Hertz, who is responsible for a number of books, particularly the 2001 Myths and Facts, which has to do with which is a guide to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Puts things into a very clear format: what is a myth and what is a fact. And Mr. Hertz is also on the board of some very important, shall we say, mainstream Jewish organizations, AIPAC, and some that are on the cutting edge, such as Camera, which of course I like to think of it as mainstream. There are people who think it's a great fly in the ointment because it's a watchdog group that holds the media up to a level of scrutiny that the media generally doesn't like being held to. And when did you join Camera?
Camera I joined about 6-7 years ago, and I became chairman a few months ago.
Why did you select Camera of all the watchdog groups that there are?
Number one, a nice group of people, Bostonian, and they have a way of doing business which is a nice way. Educated, care about accuracy and truth, and we just clicked.
So after a few years, with Andrea Levin.
Right. She's the president and chief executive, in the executive director.
Chief cook and bottle washer.
Yeah, and I'm the chairman. I'm the chairman of that.
Are you based in Boston?
No, I'm based in my home. In Forest Hills.
So you're a New York boy.
Right. This is where I do about half of my free time, just dealing with the Jewish nonprofit world.
This last year. Oh, that's the new edition. So there may have been one of this, and this is yours.
This was my original. The next spring they took out my name.
And you wrote this?
I wrote this.
This you wrote. Okay, so we'll talk about that.
And I'm writing a new one, which is negotiating.
So you were already with Camera. I'm gonna. Well, tell me where do you want us to start?
No, it's good.
Okay.
It's going already.
Okay. We left off. You're based here in New York, and you.
So I spend half of my time doing that type of work, and half of my time is dealing. I have a manufacturing company that deals with infrastructure, furniture for computers, or large computer environments, and a company that deals with internet, content, programming, hosting, and so forth.
Do you feel that it's part of your? How important do you think it is to be involved with Jewish organizations and the organizational Jewish world in terms of being pro-Israel and getting the message out?
For me, it's very serious. If I could turn it to a full-time involvement, I would.
Gotcha. You, after Myths and Facts, that was in 2001. In 2006, when you already were part of Camera, were you already chairman?
The book I published are independent of where I am associated with. Quotes that I give are my quotes, and not on behalf of anyone.
No, of course.
Reply was actually a result of the International Court of Justice coming against Israel. I followed it before the verdict, or the decision. And I worried that it would be somehow not balanced. But when it came out, it was absolutely not balanced. So when it came out, I was in like 50-60% done as a first draft of a new book I'm writing, which is negotiating over quicksand.
Negotiating
over
quicksand. I assume that has to do with the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Well, with the rejectionism for over 100 years. But I collected good material, I purchased from the British Archive every piece of paper that had to do with the mandate from 1918 to 1940, about 20-some thousand pages, bounded by years. And I really read, I would say, a quarter of it because it's so much. But I found great things about how Jewish image was very positively portrayed during the beginning of the mandate time.
In the Western world.
In Western world, Britain,
Western world.
50-some countries voted for the Jews to have the land unanimously. The League of Nations would get decision made unanimously. There was no minority and majority. So the piece of land that was promised to the Jews was promised by the entire world, actually. At the same time, when people talk about mandate, they feel that there is only one mandate. The mandate is a system that was applied to all the countries that were under mandate. At that time in the Middle East area, it was Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and the Jews. So we were at the same level. So people say, oh, the mandate is over. So if it's over also for Jordan and it's over for Iraq. So let's
You like it when people
break
talk,
them apart
when
again.
people like to talk about the ancient kingdom of in Jordan.
Right.
They look at them and say the ancient kingdom in Jordan that began in 1948, the ancient kingdom.
And the way those people were getting the land, there was no nationality that matched the reality on the ground.
Absolutely.
People were giving a piece of land and said, this is Iraq.
Absolutely.
What's your connection to this piece
That's
of land?
why
I
when
was
they
here at the same time.
make a big fuss about, as some people have suggested now, that perhaps the only solution in Iraq is to divide the country, and people are looking at it as though you're talking about something that is sacrosanct, of biblical import. I mean,
They
the whole
used
thing
to
was
it.
made up.
They used to it, absolutely. So I had a lot of material, and I read their decision. And just amazing.
You're talking now about the International Court.
Court of Justice. And I said, these guys are like either blind, anti-Semite, or whatever it is, but it's no way a normal person would come with
What else,
such.
if it were not anti-Semitism, what else would you attribute it to?
Well, it's like incompetent people who didn't even read the material and then wrote whatever they want.
Do you think these people are incompetent?
They were very tricky. In my opinion, the whole verdict was written maybe by 3 or 4 people. You had the ambassador from Jordan, Egypt, the lawyer for the PLO, and you see the style of writing, and you see style of writing of the PLO and their lawyers on others matter, and you see how much involved they are. The bias here is like not questionable, and give you an idea about, we spoke about mandate. If you read their verdict, they say that the beginning of the Palestinian issue comes out from their rights in the mandate of Palestine. And it says, the mandate of Palestine didn't mention Arabs even once. It's completely for the Jews. Where did they come with this idea? Another issue is Article 51, which is self-defense, the right to self-defense, where anyone who is being attacked has the right for self-defense. They came with a formula that stripped Israel for the right for self-defense, saying the following: if you are not a country, if you're fighting a non-country,
an entity that is not a country,
and you have control of the people who fight you, then this does not apply.
The right of self-defense.
Right. It's taken from no place. The charter cannot be changed. The charter, actually, by the previous president of the court, says there is no reason to change. If it would like to say it, it would probably say it. And the funny thing is that when the British judge signed the same paper, and in England, just 2 years later, a year or two later, you have a terror attack with the buses, right? Now look, so they were attacked by a non-state, and they had full control of their citizen, which means Britain does not deserve self-defense status, fighting terrorists. Because those people, under the formula that the International Court of Justice
one of
used
the biggest,
for Israel.
one of the problems that the Western world has in terms of fighting terrorism is this, if you will, debate where in which liberals are saying that this should be treated as a criminal offense. So you go after individuals and you bring them to a court of justice and you try them, and we conservatives look at it and we say, wait a minute, this isn't a matter of open for the criminal courts. This is a matter for the military.
Can we cut a second? I just want to drink because I've
Can I get you?
burned.
Can we get you?
Just,
do you have some
just
heartburn?
water. Yeah.
About self-defense.
Right.
And I'm saying
Which
that,
is-
that the difference is that
Is it running? You're running?
those of us who consider this, those of us on the conservative side say that this is a matter for the military. It's a matter of self-defense.
Self-defense by the charter is very simple. It says individual and non-individual have the right.
When you
to
say
self-defense.
charter, which charter are we talking about?
The UN Charter is international law. Period. There's no other book that is called
And that's what the
international.
ICC referred to.
Everything you
referred to.
do has to come from there. So even if some kind of a law looks strange if you look at the charter and this, but it cannot conflict with the charter in order to be considered
So
international law.
the International Court of Justice in The Hague, when it was trying Israel,
Right,
what they were doing is referring back to international law based on the United Nations Charter.
correct. They had to. In the case, for example, of self-defense, they didn't because it's a very strong article. It says if you are being attacked, you have the right to attack back.
It also
They
says
wanted
that,
to
it also
take-
says that if a military hides itself, its soldiers,
Mhm.
in a civilian
Ah, that's the-
population,
that's the
that the
question.
one who is at fault is the military that
There's
is hiding.
there is no protection.
if
there is
civilians
no
are
protection to
hurt.
people who hide a civilian or civilians who are helping them are not protected.
Correct.
Also. But the summary of this is basically here. It says no distinction rests between genocide and the undoing of the state of Israel by the International Court of Justice. To suggest denying Israel's right to self-defense in favor of Palestinian terrorism is a crime against humanity.
And that is the premise of your book.
Right. And what's nice about the book, it was sent to everyone that is involved in this stuff, and no one fights the book. It's all documented.
Let's talk a little bit about the issue that was at the center of this trial, which is the fence itself. When was the fence erected by Israel?
It's over time. It takes many years to do it. It's a tough
When did they
terrain.
start?
I don't remember the exact day.
In
It's,
the 1990s?
in the 1990s, correct.
Exactly.
Right. And it protected just segments.
Mhm.
But when terrorism became sophisticated, as they say, and terrorists were able to drive into Israel, then came the decision to expedite the building of the wall.
Well, the understanding was that before Oslo, in fact, many people who became so upset with Oslo was because in the early 1990s, this was after the first Intifada, and it looked very much as though the PLO was going to be consigned to the dustbin of history. The PLO had no power left at all. Arafat was in Tunisia, and it looked as though there was going to be. Israel was doing very well economically, and all of a sudden, Rabin came into office, and there were secret negotiations leading to Oslo.
To be fair to Rabin, I think it's the cooking of Peres and some other guys, and then Rabin was
It was his-
presented with a situation. He says, "Look, hope for peace." Now he was put in a situation where
It was his
he-
government. It was his government,
Right.
and whether we, the eyes of history will blame him or defend him, but Oslo is his. He is the one who signed it. He is the one who defended it.
Mhm. Right.
When we say that post-Oslo, of course, terrorism became an enormous problem for Israel. It had been a problem all along, but I think the numbers escalated dramatically
Mhm.
after Oslo.
Mhm.
Do
We
you
have, I think, since Oslo, over 1,500 dead.
terrible.
Thousands of people
Thousands
wounded.
of people away. It has become
And
a.
bad wounds, not simple wounds.
No. We tend to dismiss whenever we hear nobody was killed, that there were 15 people wounded,
Mhm.
and we stopped. We don't think that this means 15 people whose lives will never be the same. We're not talking about
People,
minor wounds.
families, everyone.
Everyone.
It's a different society.
Yes, yes.
So,
the wall came as a reaction to the terrorism.
Well, usually you protect yourself in the territories, settlements, which are, in my opinion, a very nice word.
Communities.
The British use the word settlements in a very positive word. Need protection. So they built fences around themselves.
Around themselves. Some
Right.
of them did, some of them didn't.
Right. And that wasn't sufficient. And so there were some areas that would, basically the wall itself as a wall is less than 5% of the entire length of the stuff. And it was set up in places that there is issues of height and logistics, how to shoot at someone who just passes by that wall. So the wall is very high, but it really prevents vehicles. And most of the cases in Israel happened while someone was driving the terrorist into Tel Aviv, dropped him and ran away. Today it's very tough for them to use a vehicle. So they have to really take a tour and a detour, and it takes them much, much longer. And the longer they are on the go, there's an advantage of getting a good intelligence. For example, the last case now that happened just last week, 2 days ago. The guy was roaming around and was sufficient time to get good info and actually arrest him in an apartment in Israel.
Well, the intelligence, as
Yeah.
they say, is the key to everything.
Yeah. See, what happened is that this is as much as I get it from people I know and spoke to about, is that the homicide bombing was so bad, and you tried to stop those guys who were in places that didn't make really sense because they would explode themselves in that place. So if you put armed guards in a wedding hall, and the guy couldn't get into the wedding hall, but he exploded outside the door.
And the guards got killed.
Or many other people. The same thing in the coffee shops and in other places. And Bogi Ya'alon, at the time the chief of staff, together with the security services, decided to change the tactics. Take all the assets, take the money, take everything that was invested in keeping buses, keeping bus stops safe. Go after the terrorist in his bed. We want to get him in his bed.
That was the tactic of target assassinations.
No. This is, I come to arrest
That's what I'm
you.
saying.
I come to arrest you. You don't. You resist. You shoot. We'll shoot you. The army said that there is an advantage to get them live because they have info.
Correct.
And so it's also good for the international world to see that we are trying to arrest, and usually, it's like a 50-50. Those who resist, obviously, at the end of it...
Well, there also have been targeted assassinations.
Right. The targeted assassination didn't do as much as the stuff that they're doing now. Every night they pick up. If a guy woke up and says, suicide bombing is pretty good, this info somehow was getting to the secret services.
For a while, we thought that Israel was going to have a harder time igniting its intelligence network because, quite frankly, the Israelis were outrageous at the beginning of Oslo to those people who had helped them. The Israeli government really did turn. They were, what did they call them? Stinkarim?
Right, stinkers.
They would
come in and tell us.
People who had helped Israel
Right.
Received no help whatsoever back from Israel. As a matter of fact, Israel sort of turned them over to the PLO, and we know what the Palestinians...
See, Lebanon, Israel takes off and they live...
Well, many of them, but many of them came to Israel, and many of them have rebuilt their lives.
They came on their own.
Yes.
No one came to pick them up. Believe me, they crossed the
Well,
border.
they ran with them. They ran with them. It's have you any explanation for how Israel was able to, after that kind of a history, how it was able to restart an intelligence network?
How people like this can do what?
Israel had treated
Oh, yeah.
the people it depended on for intelligence so badly. Have we any idea how they were able to restart it?
It is even worse than you think, because if you look how they treated the people at Gush Katif,
Of course.
then how can you talk about others?
What
you
they
know?
do to others. Well, Gush Katif, they weren't depending on them for anything.
And in Gush Katif, they had time to plan, they had time to do and prepare anything, even if it's pulling
You
from
saw that what just happened in the United States in a court trial
in,
with one of the Gush Katif refugees,
of course, what's her
Moshe
name?
Saperstein.
Yeah, I know them
16,
very well. Not him, his wife I know well.
Both of them. He's a marvelous writer, by the way, Moshe. $16 million,
You're
which
right.
they think will be tripled to $48 million.
Right, there is under the law, right.
What do you think the possibilities are that he will collect?
Look, they have
everything?
assets, they'll just go after assets, you know. I think they have a building that they are trying to put a hand on in New York City.
Wouldn't that be
It's owned by
something?
the PLO. They have to know that this would run,
The Clinton
This would be
administration,
after
of
them.
course, did everything it could to prevent people like Flato, who had won sizable awards in the courts against Iran,
Mhm.
and the Clinton administration did everything it could to prevent the Flato
the
family.
current administration is actually a good guy who's dealing with banking, money transfer, and all this stuff. They're very strong on preventing.
So he may actually get something.
They might, yeah.
One of the people who, of course, was very, very actively involved in changing some of the policy, because up until a few years ago, when they talked about Americans who were injured abroad having the right to sue, they really had almost left Israel and the terrorists out of it. Then they were talking about Britain and France. Mort Klein
Mhm.
of the Zionist Organization of America waged an amazing fight against
I
the
worked
State
with him a
Department,
lot.
but then both of you won, because Moshe Saperstein's ability
Mhm.
to sue here was certainly based on
Mhm.
those efforts.
You have to do a lot with human rights, which is a favorable subject in courts, actually. And so
Thank
you
God.
don't even have to be, in some cases, you don't have to be an American in order to sue on the basis of human rights
In the American
in the
courts.
American court.
Interesting. Now,
Which is a
when-
suggestion I said to some Israelis to think about those who can get relief from the government. Maybe you should come to America and sue the government. They'll have to move, they'll have to do something. They'll be embarrassed. Especially like Saperstein, American.
Saperstein is an American.
American.
He has a right
How
to
is-
sue.
What do you do? Under international law, you put me out of my home. It's
Didn't
against international law.
Absolutely.
Kids were pulled out from home against international law. But the world was very happy, no one complained. and sometimes you think this low-level thinking of politicians. He said, but you see, the whole world is for us. He says, if you would disappear, there'll be even more for you. That, you look at them as a hechsher to move Jews out of...
And you see what we got, of course.
Right.
But we have, as they've moved the border, they've just simply moved the war. Are they going to have to move out of Sderot now?
Yeah, it's also Boogie Allen says, it doesn't make a difference what you give them, they'll just move
They're
the
just moving-
the hostility to the same line.
Let's go back to the court and
Yeah.
the book. I know that the court trial was about the fence. And
I'll tell you, the International Court of Justice doesn't have a lot of power. They make a lot of noise out of it. But it is not more, no less than the General Assembly.
an unbinding resolution.
This completely unbinding. It's more called, you can call it recommendation, you can call it sentiment. Has no power, has no enforcement
except
power.
that when they've tried people, they've put them in prison.
Not the International Court of Justice. It's
Which is-
another court. It's not the International Court of Justice. That's a criminal court. And this is
Well,
where
I know
they go
that
after Milosevic and all
the
those
fear
guys
was that they were going to try to go after Sharon or...
in a different court,
Mm.
or under different statute, because it is individual countries came up with their own. It's amazing.
Yes,
Belgium
it is. Belgium.
makes a law. I can try someone who I never dealt with,
And
never
who never had
lived here.
never had anything to do with Belgium.
Right,
But
I
if
never touched the Belgium any place, but I'll try it.
And the question is, I mean, that was one of the issues, of course, for some Israelis. about
Look,
some
in
of
Belgium it was very nice. It's very, very simple because America fell into the same law.
Exactly.
And America says if you want the NATO to be out of Belgium, and we'll isolate you a little bit, continue doing it. So they
Belgium
go and
backed
they
off.
voted.
They still needed NATO at that point. But when we talk about the International Court of Justice and the fence, the court found that the fence had to be torn down. That the fence, whatever the Arabs were calling it. Why are you in favor of the fence as it is now? Do you want it expanded? What do you think?
The fence, look, the fence is a security fence, and it does its job. It reduced the attacks that otherwise would come through those areas by 90%. You see the numbers. Last year, I think there were 2 suicide attacks. I don't know, 11 casualties. A few years ago, it was like 200 and some 300 a year. How do you deal with it? You put a fence, it stops.
Do you want more fence?
I want any security. If they decide that fence is good, let them do the fence. Now came the two schools of thought. One says, the more conservative religious said, don't put a wall, it's our land. You're dividing the land of Israel. Comes the Arab, says, look, this wall disturbs my movement. But I say in the book, look, your movements, proportionality, have nothing to do with...
What about the Jews on the other side of the fence? People claim that this fence is not just a security fence, that eventually it will become a border.
It might.
What do you say to the Jews who live on the other side? Should they come back to America?
Well, here is what I said. The mandate for Palestine, which is Jewish Palestine, the mandate for Palestine was given only to the Jews. There was no mandate for Palestine for Arabs. Gives Jews the right to live any place between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a possibility that it's going to be ruled by someone else, but still Jews should be allowed to live in these areas. You can't protect everyone. I mean, otherwise you're going to have to put probably a wall across the Jordan River for the valley. The only one that I heard talking was Tzipi Livni, who said this would be a border.
Yes.
Now, no one authorized her to give away pieces of Eretz Israel. No one authorized her even to say that this is the border. But they like to talk. Who knows what would be the final outcome of the stuff. But one thing Israel has to insist is, if in Israel Arabs can live and move and work, Jews can do the same in the West Bank.
Now that's what many of these Jews in Gush Katif wanted. What they said was, I don't want to leave my land. You're saying the land is going to be ruled by the Palestinians? I lived under the Turks. Jews lived, the Jews lived in Eretz Yisrael under the Ottoman Empire. Why can't we live in Eretz Yisrael under the Palestinians? Mm-hmm. And of course, there is a mandate from the Palestinians that their lands be Judenrein. Mm-hmm. Oh. And everybody seems simply to accept that.
People don't understand. If you look at the history, and in my new book, I documented 100 years of rejectionism. It's just hopeless. Hopeless. You look for something good, and it's just disintegrates, and nothing. It all becomes hostile.
Poor Condoleezza Rice found that out this weekend, didn't she?
Well, she
went full of hope. This is going to be a new unity government for the Palestinians, and they're going to recognize Israel. And of course, Hamas looked at her and spat in her eye and said, "Never."
I'm very surprised because such. I don't know if she's naive or she's not very pro-Israeli.
Had nothing. She ended it in the same way it had to. She walked out.
Look at other things that she did. Just the Rafah crossing. The army people say it's no good for Israel. The Palestinian will use it for bringing arms and stuff, and she insisted, sign the paper.
And it is so surprising because we know that whenever the Israelis have stood up to America, it has always done extremely well in American eyes. Do you know what one of people remember Sharon for? and where his numbers in the United States went way, way up, was when he said to George Bush, we are not going to play Czechoslovakia.
Right.
And all of a sudden, Sharon's approval record went up to the sky, and the United States backed
to
off.
apologize, right.
Well, they didn't really.
They
Sharon
Right,
apologized,
right.
but
They didn't
but
mean-
it
but
was
they also-
out there. It was out there, and everyone heard it.
Yeah.
And after that, boy, did they become friends.
You see, she feels the structure today of the government is a very weak structure
Where?
in Israel. Yeah, I just was there for 10 days. I went with the Conference of Presidents, which I'm a member, and then I stayed with the mission from
Were you there for camera?
both the Conference of Presidents.
No, are you a
camera.
member of the Conference of Presidents as
As
a
the chairman of
representative,
camera.
as chairman of camera?
Right.
Mhm.
And you know, you meet everyone, and you can meet the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the security, and every one of them has a different idea of what is going on, not what to do, even what's going on. It's like as if they are not in the same country.
Right now, Mr. Olmert's approval rating in Israel is about 4%. It is about 4%. I know some people on the right who are not at all eager for his government to fall because they figure that as long as he's there, he can't do anything. he doesn't have the political strength to do anything, so they're very happy to.
But they are
continue.
actually damaging the country.
Without question.
Yeah.
And of course, right behind him, the fellow whose numbers are way up there is Bibi Netanyahu.
Right.
The one who seems to have been hurt the most by this government, politically, is of all people Avigdor Lieberman. He came in with tremendous strength, joined the government, much to the liberals' shock, horror, and
Look,
dismay.
yesterday numbers show that he will be only 6
Nothing.
members.
And they say that he's been damaged because he joined the
It's a
government.
government.
If he had
There's no
stayed,
principles.
if he had stayed in the opposition, fighting, he would have.
And Netanyahu got a lot of points by being quiet, cooperating, be nice, and only lately starts to
They
go a
say
little bit.
they say that if Bibi wanted to run for Senate in the United States,
You would.
he just has to find the state, and he'd probably be elected.
Yeah.
He's very popular here
Yeah.
in America. Did you get a sense of whether of how long this government has?
You know, I talked to Israelis who are in politics and says there are 120 members of Knesset.
Right.
Can you name 20?
Most people who are not involved.
Most people
cannot.
don't.
If they're lucky, if they're lucky, they
Some
can name. They
even
can
not
name the.
involved.
If they're lucky, they can name the parties.
Right. So I say, if they are invited, excluding the party that you favorite, can you name 20? They can name 20.
Or they have.
No.
They have to be able. In America, we're lucky if people know who their own senators are. So I don't fault them for this.
But Israel is a more political type environment, and people are involved. What it means is that you have a huge number of members of Knesset, that this is the best job they ever had in their life. No one knows who they are. No one criticizes what they do if they do anything. They have a car, they have a secretary, they get this for free and this for free. Why would they vote to dismiss the government? So
Principles.
they have no principle.
Principles.
They have no principles.
Because if there's no country, I won't get to sit in
If there
anybody's
If
Knesset.
there would be principles, they would do certain things. They don't do anything. I'm serious. It's like you talk about
There are people
100
who
members
say
of
that
Knesset
what Israel needs more than anything else, immediately, is a working constitution, a representative government rather than a party government. It's like Israel took the worst of the British system, where even in the British system, people do vote for their own representatives. There is no accountability. A member of Knesset only is accountable to his own party, nothing else, because no one else is voting.
It's so bad because all the corruption, for example, is all favoritism. It's to pay those who put you in the Knesset. And they expect more personal benefits from it than for the nation.
Would you
Oh,
think
I
at
put
this
in
point
there.
of becoming involved with some of the groups, and some of them are very serious, who would like to formulate a constitution. It's very funny because in Israel, you know, the Supreme Court, which has the wildest system of all, they're hoping that this new Minister of Justice is going to change it. This is a system where the judges themselves elect their peers.
Mini government.
And they elect their peers, and there is no accountability. There is no way of judging the judges. There is nowhere to go with that. But there are some very serious people who say that that what Israel needs more than anything, and will not be able to move, is without a constitution. Since you are so involved in organizational Jewry, would you think about getting involved in that kind of a push?
I don't know if I have the time, but I'm sure there are people who qualify and will do, because you can see that the Knesset cannot work with the Supreme Court. They just fight all the time, you know. Here is...
And they can't, and they don't even have the right. I mean, here, a judge can be impeaced.
Right.
A judge cannot be impeached in Israel.
Right. I mean, if you look...
There is no check and balance.
There is no fear of losing anything. You guaranteed for life certain things in Israel that is amazing. You don't give it in the Western world countries that are rich. It's 60 years. Maybe it's too short. Maybe it needs a few more years.
It needs a few more years for it to percolate and to go.
What the other places did in 60 years? Nothing. Look at this country, what it did in 60 years.
It had a constitution.
Well,
it did have a constitution.
There's some basic laws that if they'll put them all together, there'll maybe be a start of a constitution. But it is.
You understand that in the Supreme Court, when there's something that the Supreme Court justices don't like, they inform the poor person coming to the bench that what he wants is unconstitutional. Israel doesn't have a constitution. They mean it's against the American Constitution, which somehow or other Israel sort of thinks it can tag on after, without a constitution.
They started the country and they were adapting Ottoman law, British law, just to start running. And then individuals, look, from Ben Gurion, who was a great guy compared to these guys now.
Well, at least they were principals.
Yeah, they were right. They loved the country. They did things for the best of the country, but they also took care of themselves and the party. I would forget that my father worked in the refinery, and the refinery in Israel was controlled by in Haifa, which was a target.
Is that where you were from?
Initially, we lived in Haifa, and which was a target of the Hezbollah.
Sure.
But the Union was Mapam, not Mapai. Mapam was a very lefty group.
Sure.
You couldn't say a word or mention another party because you would be out of work. So we, in the house, were debating sometimes. When I was a kid, 7, 8 years old, my father always said, don't say a word about the party. Because my father was a liberal and Herut. He was going between Herut and liberal. He says, don't say a word because the refinery is run by the union from Mapam, which was leftier than Mapai.
Of course.
So, you know.
You've lived in Israel for how many years?
24.
And you served in the army. You were in the Yom Kippur War.
Yep.
And then you moved to the United States.
Then I came to study and I stayed.
Where did you study?
In Long Island University.
And
the first university who accepted me. I just.
And you stayed in Long Island. And so now you are working. You finished this book,
right?
And now you're working. What is the working title of the new book?
It's Negotiating over Quicksand.
And what is the quicksand?
The quicksand is the perception that it just doesn't turn to reality. If someone can believe that he can negotiate with terrorists, with people who send their kids to kill other kids and kill themselves, that's illusions. That's like.
What is your answer to those in America who say, and even I shouldn't say America, to those Israelis who say, Rabin said it, that you can't negotiate with your friends, you have to negotiate with your enemies?
So we did 100 times, 150 times, how many times you can try.
Those of us in America look at Rabin and we say, no, you don't negotiate with your enemies. You beat your enemies, and after you defeat them, then you can negotiate. Then you can be very magnanimous in victory. But first you have to achieve victory.
All the peace agreements happen with one loser and one winner.
And the idea of negotiating with somebody who says, I'm here to kill you.
You don't even have a body to deal with. This is their primaries is a bullet, you know? One bullet and the guy is gone. How can you deal with someone and trust someone
Even
long
people
term?
who are turning around and calling Mr. Abbas a moderate. I mean, calling him a moderate when you look at his past, I mean, this is a man who's a Holocaust denier. He has his PhD in Holocaust denial
Right.
from the
Basically.
Soviet Union. That's what it's about, the myth of the 6 million.
Right.
I mean, you can put it anywhere you want, but
Right.
that's what the man's PhD
Mhm.
thesis was.
And 40 years he's a deputy, loyal deputy of Arafat. I'm sure.
And he has done, in his capacity, we're not even talking about Hamas, he has done absolutely nothing to curtail the propaganda that children are subjected to day after day on Palestinian television and
They just
radio
brought it up
media.
now because they actually printed new books
New
under
books.
his stuff.
Correct, correct. I think of all people, Hillary Clinton
Right. Picked it up.
and was able to comment on
Mhm.
it. I think on this, we're not talking about a difference between Democrats and Republicans in the United States. I
Mhm.
think in the United States, we're talking about men and women of goodwill who take a look at this and
Mhm.
say, what are we talking about? And nobody calls Mr. Abbas on it. Nobody says
The
to him,
amazing
Mr. Abbas,
part,
explain
It's
this.
the government of Israel. I should say, look, we'll start with very easy things.
Fix the books.
Books, fix them. When you fix them, give us a copy, we'll look at it, and we'll go to the next stage. But this is a
Former
minimum. It's a
Ambassador
minimum.
Dennis Ross has said, when he talked about his own failure, which of course it was, in the Clinton administration, he says that the failure came because there was no insistence on the Arabs living up to the agreements which they themselves had signed. Nobody asked for Palestinian-Arab accountability. There was a lot of talk about Israel
The
living up to...
accountability was the problem of Israel. And Peres and
Exactly.
his other guys. They saw that those guys are violating everything from the very beginning. Instead of coming to the people of Israel and saying,
Why?
look, we tried, we have
Why?
No.
Why did they do? I mean, I cannot. I mean, I do know people on my side, on the right-wing side, who have accused Mr. Peres of everything from murdering Rabin to whatever. And I'm not even going to start on that on that tack. If we take the position that Mr. Peres cares about Israel, why did he do this? Was it just a mistake, or was there something else? What is the rationale? Do
Look,
you know?
I don't think he's a great whatever.
He didn't want Israel's demise, I hope.
He was so into coming out with peace that it didn't make a difference. And they just, I think the lack of logic. Just simply lack of logic. What makes you believe that the guy is going to do something good for you when he violates it from the
why
very
does
beginning?
Tzipi Livni now, who didn't start out as a Fabisina left-winger, why did we have someone like Tzipi Livni who is standing out there and saying, oh yes, we can deal with this and we can deal with that and we're going to retrench and we're going to...
Look, she's a lady, nice lady, but zero experience. She was someplace, I don't know which number, at the Likud even, no one paid attention to her. And when the disengagement started to get momentum, she picked it up and became the like of Sharon. And Sharon, gave her anything she wants to do. Suddenly she finds herself between her and Olmert, who was number 39 in the Likud, being prime minister, and she's becoming a foreign minister. She becomes actually a justice minister.
Right.
In her time, there were more violation of human rights in Israel than in any time. In her time, there was no one case that the settlers won in court, and there were hundreds of cases of the claim to the land, claim of treatment, claim of rights, all.
Dr.
were
Aryeh
empty.
Eldad,
Right.
member of Knesset from the National Union Party, made a statement during the Amana
Mhm.
issue, in which he said that the hugs in Gush Katif turned into the stones at Amana,
Mhm.
which will turn into the bullets the next time around.
People are actually claiming that the Amana business was exercised by cops and horses and just
We saw it.
being brutal.
We saw it. There were,
Yeah.
you know, there was a time when the police could confiscate cameras and movie
Mhm.
cameras so that nobody could see what
Mhm.
was happening during the brutality that came during the demonstrations against
Mhm.
Oslo.
Mhm.
We couldn't actually see what was happening
Mhm.
because the police would confiscate
Mhm.
cameras. Cameras can now be the size of a tie clip.
Right.
You can put a camera on your headband.
Mhm.
No one can confiscate anything anymore. They're too small. And so now we are treated to pictures of black-shirted Israeli policemen on horses trampling girls. We're treated to Israeli policemen threatening religious 16-year-old girls with rape. 14-year-old girls with rape. And to me, one of the most shocking of all was the little boy, the Eli child, he was the child who was brought to Hadassah
Right,
and
it was hit on his head,
put
right.
on life support.
Mhm, mhm.
And this I have from a nurse that I spoke to at Hadassah, who told me that, the parents obviously were with the child when he was
Mhm.
on life support. And at one point...
But he's good at now.
Well, at one point, because he needed to, his parents were at his bedside, they needed a break. His brother, who was in the army serving, his older brother came. So you had a picture of this 19-year-old boy in his uniform sitting at the bedside of his little brother on life support, put there because a policeman had
Mhm.
knocked him on the head. And evidently a policeman walked into the emergency room and saw this. I mean, it's an affecting scene. You'd have to be not to be affected by this kind of a scene. And he asked the nurse who they were, and the nurse told him, and the policeman said, loud enough for everybody in the emergency room to hear, "I hope he dies." Now, you can't very well tar the entire police force because of one idiot policeman and what he had to say. The thing that I think frightened many of us who heard it was how prevalent is this? Is this what we sweated for? Did we sweat on the ground in the United States, those of us whose hearts were pounding, so that a policeman in a black shirt could say about a 14-year-old child, a Jewish child, I hope he dies?
Look, when you tell cops to cover their numbers, their ID, which is by law they should have it. The government tells you, you're going out to a mission, you cover it, so no one what does
Except
it
that
mean?
now that you see it does.
I can beat up anyone and I will
But
be
that now they
protected.
can't do it because fortunately Israel is such a small country that with that little camera on your lapel and you take his picture, they not only know where this policeman lives, they know where his mother lives, they know where his aunt lives, and they know what his Bubba did for a living.
Can I interject a question?
Yeah.
So does this just give the Arabs and Naturi Carter their justification that Israel should not have existed to begin with
What would?
as a state?
The state what we're talking about, a state
Because-
where we see this kind of violence, where a government tells policemen cover up your name tags, where in which people who are from Gush Katif are thrown out of their homes and nobody in the country seems to care. Are we where the Arabs say you had no right to it in the first place, and Gush Katif and the Naturi Karta says to us, Israel can't rule, they have no right. What would your answer be to both sides?
Well, I wouldn't even talk to them. That's it. Let them stay wherever they want and do whatever they want.
It's
And you
far-
talk to them, you give them too much kavod.
Yes, but as far as the Arabs, this wall shouldn't even be
Arabs
there.
don't
in the-
understand the strengths of the Israeli system, even if it's not a perfect democracy. But it is a democracy. In terms of debate, in public debate, you open, you sit. I sit with 5 screens. Believe me, I have every magazine. I have the satellite from Israel for news. You can't be more democratic and open. And it makes the people strong. When the war in the Galil, in Lebanon, was a tough.
This last summer.
Yeah, it was tough war, but you know what? People who showed up to the war, reservists, 110% came in. What is 10% more than they counted on? People who could stay at home because of previous injuries and stuff.
Didn't.
Everyone showed up. So,
Eli, they say something about democracies and war. A democratic country can lose a war, but almost invariably that democratic country learns what it did wrong
Mhm.
and comes back much, much stronger.
Mhm.
I mean, history has shown us
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I
Are
think
you
that-
basically optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm very optimistic in one way, in not in another way. When I tell people, and obviously I don't want anyone to lose faith in Israel, I says when you look at Israel, look at Klal Israel. If you deal with individuals, it's a problem. But think about the whole thing and you say, wow, 60 years, a country, beaches, people work, high-tech. This is where you have to look. If you want to get depressed, deal on individual basis with a Tzipi Livni or with a Olmert. And this is, sometimes when I'm really mad, I start looking at nice pictures of Israel and Teva, the natural stuff. I mean, beautiful stuff comes out. And the internet now, people are sending pictures which are unbelievable nice picture about the country.
And certainly economically, despite everything,
Yeah.
the economic picture is quite lovely. I mean, you have investors who are coming in who say there is nothing like it.
If you see the numbers, it's amazing.
Amazing.
What Israel is getting. All the Arab states altogether will not get in 10 years what Israel is getting.
So
Not even a percentage of it. Or the output. I mean, when we think about what, it's easy to talk about
Can
Gush
you believe that per
Katif.
capita a guy in Israel makes more than in Saudi? I says,
That's correct.
Where is the money in Saudi? They stole the money.
Of course, and it's buried in the sand. But even Gush Katif, which of course was
This was
so productive. I'm just talking economically. Let's not even talk about the human rights issue or the religious issue. But even from an economic standpoint, we had a situation in which you had these very thriving hothouses and agricultural plants, which were left. Many of them, they were bought and left intact, and we know what happened to them.
It didn't take not too long, and they just ripped it apart.
Well, many of them were destroyed before anything happened. A few of those that were left intact, they tried to blame the Israelis. They said they couldn't get through the openings to be able to transport their goods in order to sell them.
They had pictures. They broke the system.
most
they
of them
stole
were,
the
yes.
pipes. They stole every piece.
Just destroyed what was left.
And you had the guy
Many of them, many of the hothouses.
Wolfson, who was the chairman of the bank, the World Bank. I think he
He gave
himself
money,
gave
yes.
us $1 million.
He and Tish and Zuckerman, they gave a great, American Jews gave they paid.
To the Israelis
They
to live
paid
it-
the Israelis
to live it
leave
intact.
it. What was amazing to me is that I understand many of those checks were fine. They cashed those checks, and then the Arabs destroyed it.
destroyed it.
I think the Jews who got paid got paid.
Yeah. So
So,
they just
how would you respond to the Arabs or Islamists or whatever you would say that this is their country?
we're here.
No, that
They want America too.
They
and
do.
we
They do.
were illegal occupiers, and they called the
Well,
the
until-
Jews are living on the West
until-
Bank as occupied territories, etc.
The West Bank is occupied, but so is Netanya.
Yes.
Let me tell you one thing that you people don't know. It's a funny thing. If you go to the Pentagon site and you go to the dictionary and you look for occupied territory, listen to what is occupied territory in the books of the America. It excludes any area that you monitor, manage, or supervise by an agreement. And so, just for the going to understand, West Bank is monitored, supervised under an agreement of the Oslo Agreement. Area A, Area B, Area C. Based on the Pentagon dictionary, this is not occupied territories. But very few know it, and in the next book I'm pointing it out. You can go on the site and then check it. But in general, look, how can you occupy land that belongs to you?
The issue
And
is
it's
that
documented. It's documented. This is documented in this book, and I'll leave you this book. because what the International Court of Justice tried to do is damage the historical base of the reasoning for a Jewish state in this place. And this has a lot of just simple facts. I contacted the previous president of the Court of Justice. He's a Jewish guy, Schwebel. Doesn't want to get involved, but helped me a little bit, gave me some tips how to go about things. Scholars, Professor Stone, I mean, top guys who dealt on the issue of the mandate and the land. It's covered, it's documented. You know, very few people fight about the facts of the mandate that says this is an area given to the Jews at the same time when we gave 10 times, not 10 times, 100 or 150 times more land to other. Just in Jordan, which the mandate for Palestine had a provision. People think it was illegal to cut Jordan away from the mandate. It wasn't, because there was a paragraph in the original mandate document that says that the British and the League of Nations can decide one day to separate that area from the mandate for Palestine, which they did. So it wasn't an illegal move, it was a legal move. It was an upsetting move, but it was a legal move. Just in this area, it was 3/4 to a quarter, 76% was given away.
Taken away.
Taken away. But you know, Israelis don't know the stuff. I'm sitting now in
Israelis don't know anything. They
I'm
don't even know there
I'm translating now the mandate for Palestine and the chapter that I wrote about into Hebrew.
They
So
say
people can
they
read.
say that some of the right wing politicians that I've spoken to, the nationalist camps, say that when they get they don't talk about if getting in, they say when they get into the government, the portfolio that they believe will be that they want more than anything
Even
else
for schools and
is
stuff.
education.
Oh,
Education.
People don't know, even politicians. I said to a politician, do you know why you lost Taba when you negotiated with Egypt? Because someone came, the Egyptian came with a map that showed Taba in the Egyptian side, and the map was from 1902 or 1906. So they tell me old doesn't count a lot. Every piece counts. Where is our belief in the Bible, which is old?
Very old.
Right? And we actually have to be very proud that we have a book that no one changed, no one touched, intact, and it's alive for so many years.
Somebody recently described to me the right and the left in Israel as two very smart card players. And both of them are good card counters. They both know what's going on. We know demographically that something very important happened last year. According to the demographics, last year for the first time 51% of all first graders, of all 6-year-olds in school in Israel, were either in Dati schools or in religious schools or in yeshivot, 51%. And that's first grade, which counts more than the kindergartens, because first grade may be where you're going to stay in school. If that trend continues, we can imagine that in 12 years from now, the majority of 18-year-old voters will be children who are the products of a religious education, who at least who will know where the kotel is, and who will know at least. That's not to say whether they're going to be right wing or left wing. I mean, we all know that there are religious Jews who are more left wing. That does happen, but for the most part, they are not. And we say if we have the right wing and the left wing as card players, and they both are counting the cards, someone said the left wing knows that its days are numbered, and therefore it has only one option, and that is either to give up the game very, very fast, or to overturn the whole table so that there is no more game.
You can see it in the army now. It's more and more officers are religious officers, and completely unproportional to the numbers in the public.
Correctly. There was just a story, I think, in Mariv, of all places, about a new young officer in the Air Force. And his tzitzis were out waving in his family. He's a product of the yeshiva in Hebron, and he's now
Look, I don't know if you know Kahanas, one of the Kahanas.
His children.
Related, yeah, is Air Force pilot.
Really?
If the international court is supposed to be truly a court of justice, and the Arabs are Islamic fundamentalists, or whatever label you call them, are so opposed to the actions of the Israeli because they cry human rights violations, lack of fairness, etc. Why did the international court deny any statements from victims of suicide or terrorist attacks, whatever you want to call them?
Right. Yeah, I write
Well,
about
he
it.
talks about the fact that,
No, I write it in the book also. Al-Magor, which was representing the victims, submitted a request based on the rules to show up in front of the court. The court rejected it.
So was this a kangaroo court?
that's what he said. He
Yes.
started this out.
Their mistake is that they were so brutal and so stupid to tell someone that he can't defend himself when my dog can defend himself against another dog. The charter does not classify who is being protected. Anyone, it says. It doesn't say anyone. It says individuals or groups have the right to self-defense. You know, there is very simple rules in international law that can really help people who want to defend Israel. There is something very bad called an aggressor. An aggressor is someone who starts hostility by ways and means of armed struggle. Not struggle, but by arm. An aggressor has no rights. You can beat him up, you can do whatever you want. And the definition again is someone who starts hostility by armed force. If you know this, just this simple stuff, and it's covered in, I think it's Resolution 1373 of the, which it was actually a General Assembly resolution, but adopted and accepted by all members. So now it became part of international law. If it's not 100%, then it cannot be international. It's just a recommendation. On this basis only, every war Israel fought, it wasn't the aggressor.
Of course not.
Right? It didn't start. So now people say about 67, but 67, it was well, I'll give you an answer. It was a surprise move on the side of Israel, so it was, they started. Well, international law in aggression give a list of samples. One of them is shutting off waterways.
Which is what they usually like.
So they first were the aggressor, because by arm they said, this is closed, anyone passing here, I'm shooting.
Right.
And so people have to be taught that 67 was a surprise from a tactical point of view, how it was handled, what was the target, how smart they did it, but the violation...
But it was still a defensive move.
Right, but the violation and the aggressor was Egypt.
Right.
So you constantly have in the media the label of, and I understand that they're adopting Soviet and Nazi propaganda techniques to tell a lie enough times, people believe it. Israel is constantly called the aggressor, the occupier.
People don't
But
know.
Akiva, you know, I must say, that was much truer 10 years ago. When the media came, I mean, those of us who want to talk about, and want to be a little bit more gentle on the media, will say that it's not so much that all the media was anti-Semitic, but it was much more of a herd mentality. They just do whatever the guy in front of them is doing, which I think is true. Today, things have changed. We now have so many media outlets that no longer is the American public enslaved to just what the major media wanted to say. Fox News is beating out every single cable news outlet that there is. Their numbers are way higher, and they really are, for the most part, very fair and balanced. And they certainly give Israel its fair shake. The minute any cable company puts on someone who is intelligently right-wing, those numbers go sky high. The minute that the American people start to really sense a very much of a leftist move, as you said, where it becomes, the bias becomes so clear, the numbers drop. NBC has made a pitch in the last month or two, really deciding to take a very far left-wing bent, and the numbers just disappeared from them. There are so many more news outlets. Newspapers are dying because people are on the internet, where they do not necessarily have to go to the New York Times. Once you're on the internet, there are so many other news outlets for you to choose from. I think all of that has got to be helping
the issue
Israel.
that you were talking about, the conflict, is an issue of knowledge. It can be the nicest guy reporting for whoever it was. He does not know what I just told you. He just doesn't
That's
know.
correct.
Yes, so how would you
I say to people, Israel has a great stand in the legal sense. Learn this legal sense and just works on this. You cannot be beaten up on legal sense. If an aggressor is someone who started a war and has no rights, you cannot change it. It's written, it's black and white. And you don't tell me that in Yom Kippur they were not the aggressors. If 67 is too much for you to talk about Egypt, we settled with Egypt. Jordan was an aggressor, right? He has no rights. Not only this, the law says in international law that the occupation is if you are taking over a territory belonging to another actor. The other actor in the West Bank was Jordan, illegally positioned itself in that area.
Walked out.
So there is no claim. There is no country that claims anything. Actor, they call it a country or a state. And so Israelis are sitting there regardless, just based on international law, not because it was given by the mandate, are there in terms of a war and a winner force, and there is no one to give the land to.
So
there was no power
that
in
there was a
Palestine.
green line, and this is where it should have been the boundaries. Where
The
now that
green line was a line.
The green line was an armistice line between Israel and Jordan.
It's being described in the book also. It's very simple. Number one, it's green line because it was marked by a green pen. I mean, this is the reason it's called the green line. But this, as a few describe, scholars, this is where the two forces met. Israel and Egypt, Israel and Lebanon, Israel and Jordan. This is where they were. Someone marked, this is the place.
So in Lebanon it's blue.
Lebanon is blue only the second time around, because they made adjustment. But
what about the settlement building that went on, Begin, etc.? So those were labeled illegal constantly.
It wasn't illegal.
Even
at most it was disputed. At most.
Even this country, even America, does not say it's illegal.
No.
It says that we promise not to. They just promise not to put more settlements. That's the issue.
So
Only
why
Only
then
by
is
Oslo. Only according to Oslo.
Right.
Sharon then there was this,
Oslo has been completely, but since the Arabs abrogated.
No. In Oslo there was no. That had nothing to do with stopping settlements.
And where was the stopping? In which one?
In one of the
Was it
agreements.
Y?
One of the agreements.
Although with Y, poor Mr. Netanyahu got
right.
beat over the head with Y. But the truth of the matter is, he maintained, and I have never seen it proven, I've read the documents, I've read the Y documents. Mr. Netanyahu claimed from the very beginning that if the Arabs give, they will get, and if they don't give, they...
This was what he did in Hebron.
Well, in Hebron he gave, though.
But he initially didn't. He says they have to do something. I think
They
they did
didn't.
something.
They didn't, and he gave it because it was already something that had been promised. It was a tremendous outcry. His dividing the city of Hebron was and we have lived to regret that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly Mr. Olmert is doing everything he can with the police to try to force the Jews of Hebron out. He's dealing with a very, very strong bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I don't know whether you saw the...
I did a video documentary in Hebron, among other places. The Golan I did on my trip that I had spoken to.
Why
I'm trying
has
to keep
the
the
Golan? Why has
Yeah.
the Golan been so favorably viewed by Israel, while Yehuda and Shomron less so?
Well,
Has to do with skiing?
strategically.
Has to do
No,
with
just
skiing?
strategically. you knew it. I remember I was a kid, and like when they were shooting from the top, with like and killing
Syria.
kids, you know, just playing sport, and it was like you were a hostage. The whole F of the Galil was a hostage to these idiots, you know.
Yeah, well, look at
And we
the,
lost so
yeah.
many soldiers taking it over twice.
Right.
One taking it over, the other time to protect it. And
How would,
people don't understand. Look, we are 40 miles from Damascus
Right?
on the Golan Heights. That's the key.
I remember
The guy,
Mr.
40, it's like
Mr.
an hour
Kerr
and
was
a half.
talking about how he thought it would be the best thing in the world for Israelis to drive to Damascus for a falafel.
Those people are all
Hummus.
poisoned. Look, if you look at almost 900,000 Jews who left Arab countries, you know, they lived pretty good among Arabs. And if you read the mandate papers, this is where I say these papers, which I bought, are not on the web for a reason. They are favoring the Jewish people, up to the point where the Jews became what the British call terrorists against them. But the Jews said, look, we fought you because you didn't let our brothers and sisters come out of the Holocaust and find a place. But up to that point, very favorable to the Jews.
Look, whenever anybody talks about obviously one of the sticking points.
No, but let me just finish. So they said about the Jews living from Arab countries, it was the Palestinian movement, which wasn't even yet Palestine, who incited the leadership to kick those Jews out. And you can see that it's the leadership that keeps the Palestinian in refugee camps, doesn't let them do anything.
yeah, Suri is what's her name? Arafat
Suha.
Suha. She's a persona non grata because she's taken so much money from.
She was a Christian woman who is very happily living in Paris. Thank you very much. But the issue, that's a very interesting issue you raise, though, about Jews living comfortably in Arab countries.
Fairly comfortable.
When you,
they were a minority, but they lived okay.
when you read the history of those Arab countries, it was episodic. You had periods of time where everything was relatively okay, always intermittently with terrible pogroms and terrible persecution. You would have periods of time when things were okay, as I said, and they were always interjected with periods of terrible persecution.
Look what religious does. The religious is now the major cause for all evils.
What we say is that if you, whenever one of the sticking points for negotiations between Israelis and the Palestinians is always the so-called Arab right of return, in which the Arabs claim that not only the refugees from 1948 and 1967, but all their descendants have the right to come back to every. And
they can say whatever they want.
Of course they do.
That every Jew that left Arab countries says, I tell people, as a joke, tell them the following: the pyramids were built by the Jews.
Exactly.
We want them. Mount Sinai is the fourth most important religious place. We want it. Would Egypt say, okay, no problem?
Not only that, but if you look at the numbers of Jews who left Arab countries is pretty much...
I have a document. I have a page from New York Times from 19
It's pretty much
899,000. It's 900,000.
It's pretty much akin to the number of Arabs.
It's more.
Well,
but the UN numbers, one number starts with 470, ends up at 700.
Right.
But that's the range. In the Jews, there is an article by the New York Times at that time. I have the page. I went to the library and I got the page. And at least there are almost 900,000 Jews, and it tells you each country how many.
Right.
And the article was saying the Jews in danger.
Right.
They realized the Jews are in danger, and that 48.
The point is that it was a population exchange. If the Arab leaders, as you said, had welcomed in their Arab brothers...
After World War II, the Germans were told, this is the border, and that's
Shine!
Shine! No one goes
Never again!
Right. And we have to worry about this.
So, how would you respond to these so-called human rights organizations, B'Tselem, Amnesty International, they say, you know.
I told you individually, I don't look at it. Collectively, I say, you look at country. There's so many human rights organizations, existing in the country. You know that most human rights of Arab countries who deal with the Arab countries cannot have an office in the country that they deal with human rights. So
we
they can't even be there.
We just came off of a pretty awful experience this past, I guess, December and January. There's a group in the United States called the Israel Campus Coalition.
Yeah.
The
And they have Zionist. I mean, they have the word Zionist in it.
Well, the Israel Campus Coalition is made up of a number of mainstream Jewish organizations, mostly, which the point was to promote Israel and Zionism on college campuses, to be a counterpoint for the terrible Palestinian propaganda that is coming out. And all of a sudden we have a group called the Union for Progressive Zionism, UPZ, which decided to bring an Israeli group called Breaking the Silence. Breaking the Silence, as far as I can see, consists of maybe a half dozen, I don't think any more than that, very disgruntled Israeli soldiers who are going around talking about what a terrible, terrible army Israel has, and how the Israeli army and certainly its leaders should be brought to the International Court for prosecution for crimes against humanity, and how terrible the occupation has been for the individual soldiers. And those, certainly the ZOA again, which saw this, reacted with great horror, and said, the fact that that UPZ is bringing these people here with the imprimatur
And being
of
sponsored
the
by the Jewish-
imprimatur of the ICC. In other words, we're all members of this umbrella group, and they're bringing them here to speak to impressionable college kids, telling them, guess what? I'm an Israeli soldier, and I will tell you, or I was an
How
Israeli
very
soldier,
good.
how terrible the Israeli army is. And this group, UPZ, was brought up to the steering committee of the ICC. And we all felt kind of good about that, because the steering committee, aside from the, you'll forgive me, usual suspects, which are the usual left-wing organizations, sitting on the steering committee was none other than Aish HaTorah. And we all said, well, that's nice, because Aish HaTorah puts out honest reporting, which is,
I think they separated now.
well,
You
no,
know?
it's a sister organization. They claim
They
that
still-
it's the same. It's a sister organization for camera, and we all said this is going to be good. Not only will they
No, say Asia Torah, I think is out of honest reporting.
no,
You sure?
almost 100% that they are still working together.
Something.
They certainly promoted together, and that this is what they, that they're going to promote this, and when it came time for a vote, not only did Aish HaTorah not stand up and scream, this is outrageous, they voted that UPZ could continue doing it. They voted that the ICC should not re-look at what kind of programs were going out there. No, any programs
What
are
was the
okay.
explanation?
And their third thing was they said that maybe we don't even have to rejudge what our own standards are. I called them and they had no explanation. They were sort of, well, we didn't think we should throw out a Jewish group. I said, who said throw them out? Why didn't you go look at their programming and say this is acceptable, don't do it again? I mean, there was nothing done. It wasn't until, I know that we wrote an article, and which of course got many of their supporters very angry, and all of a sudden Aish HaTorah said, okay, we change our vote. But changing their vote, obviously it still passed the steering committee, their changing their vote meant nothing. All it meant was, at least at that point, they can't say it passed unanimously. But where were the others? Where are groups like the American Jewish Committee, which claims to be so against the anti-Israel propaganda? Where was the ADL? Where are any of these groups to say this is an outrage? There is the Israeli army is one of the most moral armies that you are going to find
And
anywhere.
this is how they pick. You see, they pick a case like this. They use it as a reference in books, in
Of
anything.
course.
It's a footnote in anything to justify,
And-
People just don't understand.
And
the
and
damage.
the fact that these ostensibly Jewish pro-Israel organizations said, it's okay. I mean, it is an outrage. It was an outrage. There was no context. This was the kind of thing where they would show an Israeli soldier, they'd show Palestinians, young Palestinians, blindfolded and handcuffed, and an Israeli soldier perhaps, smoking a cigarette and say, see, he doesn't care about human suffering.
You should show them the prison in Iraq. What's the name over there?
Abu Ghraib.
Yes.
My position with Abu Ghraib is nobody died. I'm not saying that I don't like the fact that anybody takes advantage of a position of power, and I think they certainly should have been disciplined. Nobody died.
Take the critics and said, look, a 60 years old country, surrounded by enemies.
But it wasn't only. But that wasn't even the point. But Ellie, that wasn't even the point. The point was that the context would have said, why are the Palestinians there? They're there because too often at these checkpoints, if we don't have the checkpoints, Palestinian terrorists have come in. We don't say, why are they blindfolded? They're blindfolded because they're going to be interrogated. And we can't let them know where they're going because that would jeopardize the situation of Israeli soldiers who are there.
I wrote a piece, and I updated it a few times, called Who is Humiliating Whom? I don't know if anyone read it. It's made very good on the internet. And there I said, look, Israelis are being bothered by security issues 10 times more than Arabs.
Of course.
Every supermarket, every pharmacy, a synagogue, wedding halls, every place, you're being searched, you're being told not to go through this route and this route to Jerusalem. You cannot, you go to overseas, they tell you take off your jewelry, don't take off them against the beat.
They have security guards.
They go, right, they go, and they
you
tell,
and scanning.
And not only that, and we say, please,
yeah, El Al has to fly sometimes without the insignia because
from Vienna.
Yeah.
From Vienna, El Al has to fly without his insignia.
Where is the Arabs go to a trip and have a guard? Israeli, every kindergarten has an armed guard. This is humiliation.
So,
you know?
Back to the security wall. So what is their big complaint that they're so opposed to the security wall?
You know, the Jews have a
because it makes it harder, as he said, because they claim that Israel doesn't have the right to self-defense. We have the right to come in and try to kill you, and you don't have the right to defend yourself.
Absolutely. This is the
So is it truly inconveniencing them that they have videos on the internet? The ambulances couldn't get through, etc.
Nefesh, latzil nefesh achat, right? I mean, to save a life is to save 1,000, whatever.
Save a universe.
This is not the wall and the fence are not a little issue. It is preventing some people from coming and killing you, and then at the same time, it's tough for some Palestinian living around it. But their life is still alive. And the wall protects people who, prior to the wall, are today dead. They don't have another chance. They cannot go around and be alive.
So would Israel put the wall there if there were no, if there was no terrorism? They would tear it down like the Berlin Wall was.
If there were no terrorism, the wall, there would be no need for a wall.
Why would you have a wall?
Because there was comparisons to the wall between, the Berlin Wall.
The Berlin Wall, the arms were turned inward. The Berlin Wall was.
It divided people of the same nation. The same nation was divided. Suddenly you find yourself in the east side and in the west side.
But it was also not. But it was not to prevent terrorism. It was to prevent people from leaving.
If they didn't allow people to people who were shot or killed, who were trying to go. They allow the Palestinians to go in, if you want to call them Palestinians, if that's the correct.
You can call them Palestinian Arabs.
Yeah, okay.
There were also Palestinian Jews.
But they are allowed. They are allowed into Israel. Is that not correct?
Correct. This is what I'm saying.
Israeli hospitals have treated Palestinian Arabs. In fact, there was
with your tzedakah money.
With an attempt on a woman was going to blow herself up in one of the hospitals on the doctor that was going to treat her. So to say that it's a fair comparison to the Berlin Wall is purely a distorted emotionalism.
There are more than 50 walls being built now.
We want to build a wall between the United States and Mexico.
Right?
That is
correct. They
correct.
passed some kind of a law about it, right? But
So it's
Saudi is building now a humongous fence between it and the Iraqi border.
So it's purely they were trying to politicize something that was meant for
Look,
saving lives.
Anything you dig in an area that has nothing to do with the Mount,
With the Temple Mount.
Temple Mount, and they say it's theirs.
This has been a cry that
And
we
Haaretz helps them. I look at the Haaretz. There's a picture with a capture, some women demonstrating. The capture says they're demonstrating, they're digging on Temple Mount.
They're digging 2 football fields away from Temple Mount.
Right.
Yeah. So, but the Israeli
They're not even
Arabs
digging, they're repairing.
had a big protest. I believe where was it? The Dungate.
Mughrabi game.
Yeah.
Robbie Gay.
They had a large protest. Here the Israeli Arabs, aren't they? They have members in parliament and the Israeli Knesset,
That's
right?
democracy.
Yeah, they have a democracy. They have right. I mean, they have.
And the Israeli Arabs are now asking for half of Israel, because they say it should be, so in other words, they should get Palestine and half of Israel, and of course all the Arabs who left should come back.
If I would say, look guys, I found this document called the Mandate for Palestine. All the nations of the world at that time signed on it. Not only this, when the UN took over from the League of Nations, under Article 80, it took all those obligations to itself. And so the mandate, which is a trust, will expire when the conditions will be met. The condition didn't met, the mandate is valid, but people don't know to use it. You know what? It was so smart. They knew Jews are minority in where they live. But they didn't care that much because they said, look, this is a vast, huge area for Arabs, and Arabs moving from here to there. Jews need only this area. So let's put, in a simple way, we'll write what are the rights. And so they said, the inhabitant will have full religious and civil rights. The Jews would have those 2 and political rights. Arabs do not on a national level, not on a local level. They can be chief of a village. On national level, has no political rights. So say it's illegal. This is the law. This is what people sign. This is how the territory was divided to other Arab countries.
This is why many people have said that when they talk about that there is going to be a Palestinian entity, which could of course be Jordan, that these are people who should have a right to vote in Jordan. They live in Israel, they live here, they go to vote. They vote in Jordanian elections.
I see.
So there is also this comparison that this is another part of imperialism, you know, these
you can call it whatever you want.
Colonialism.
Half of the Arab world was established based on the mandate system. Not only this, in Africa.
There was no Iraq.
In Africa.
It was Babylon.
Syria, I understand, did not, from reading Martin Gilbert's
Right.
map book. Okay, so all these were created by from the loss of the Turk.
The Turkish Empire, the Ottoman
The
Empire.
League of Nations inherited a huge amount of space and people and had no idea what to do with it. Said, look, we'll divide it. And there'll be countries, and we'll tell those people, look, we'll put a supervisor over you. We call it the mandator. And he is going to see when you are deserving independence, we'll give you to become a country, right? So, for example, in Jordan, 46, they became a country.
The ancient Hashemite kingdom.
Yeah. So, then the Jews, among all these pieces of land, got their own land, 10,000 square miles. The smallest piece of anywhere, beside Lebanon, actually. But Arabs at that time could move from place to place. You couldn't stop an Arab in the borders and say, you are from another place.
Wouldn't know who's from. There was no such thing as a Palestinian.
Right. So
there was no such thing as a Lebanese. There was no. They were just Arabs who were.
That's why I think the British, who became the mandator, had no problem to accept the job of a mandator because they said, why would the Arab fight? Look what they're getting. They're getting so much. You know, the Jews will build themselves up. They'll have a country. And the Jews couldn't.
Because what they didn't understand was they didn't understand Islam. They didn't understand that according to Islam, land such as Spain, that had once been Islamic country, could not, according to Islam, ever revert to anything else. It must, in the end, become Islamic again. And the idea that you had Ottoman Turks ruling in what is now Israel, and that Israel should now become a country that is ruled by the dhimmi population, is simply something that the Islamic religion and those who take it seriously cannot abide.
Yeah, we are the Crusade. There's a video on the internet, the Crusader, which is created by some Islamics.
All of a sudden the Jews became the Crusaders, right?
Well, the Crusaders, the Jews, we're all
Well, the
the
Crusaders,
non-Islamics have co-opted their country.
That because any country that was ever ruled by Islam has no justification and cannot be allowed to exist as anything. Which is why you hear them talking about Andalusia when they start talking about Spain. I mean, the Islamists, which is what we call the fundamentalists, the Islamists in this country say that Islam will be the dominant religion in the United States, and they don't know exactly how it's going to come about. The moderates hope that will come about by being able to be voted in, and the extremists say they hope it'll come about by more 9/11s.
So again, is that there are many people who are living in this illusion. Goes back to your book, the Quicksand book. We're living in some kind of fantasy or a delusion or illusion, whatever you want to call it. And despite all these you have this mandate, you have all these Oslo, numerous written agreements. We still want to live in this illusion and do not want to accept the fact that the current, the Palestinian government does not want to negotiate. Nobody wants to accept any of these written agreements or enforce any of them.
Did not even come close to offer Palestinian the state. A self-governing body. They'll think to figure out how they will be. They didn't even think about a country or a state. It's just that the Arabs learn that they can do whatever they want. They'll repeat it 1,000,000 times. The media will pick it up. No one checks anything. And look, Israel is very weak in propaganda, very weak in PR. Doesn't understand the damage it does to itself. And people who are not in that business and have no patience to read, and they hear it 20,000,000 times, they believe it.
What you're, and to summarize, so what needs to be done is there needs to be someone accountable.
You have to bring someone like Begin, who speaks English and knows history, and will tell the Arabs, this is my land, and not I will negotiate what you give me, you will negotiate what I want to give you. They turned this whole thing upside down. They are coming to Israel and is, look, we will decide what you get. And not the opposite. The opposite is only because we have the power militarily. So everyone understands it. But they think, and the rest of the world think, that it has to be the opposite. We took the land, we have to give it.
Well, this is what the Lubavitcher Rebbe, being a Chabadnik, said in Bacon's time, that it says in the Torah that this land was given, you have to tell the nations of the world that this is the land that was given to Abraham on a covenant of circumcision. And Rashi says if people say that you stole it from them, well, it says in the Torah that God gave the land of Israel to the Jews, and He's the creator of the universe. And if He wants to give the land...
Look how it's true. How it's true. That the PLO, in Arafat specifically, tried to dress up the Palestinians into the history of the Jews. He says, oh, Knaanim, we were the Knaanim. So it's very funny. Okay. He's lying, but he also proves a point, the story is a valid story.
Which is why they want to destroy so much of our archaeological.
Absolutely.
That's why they want to destroy it.
To eliminate any history. Absolutely.
What happened on the Temple Mount, I'm not talking from a religious perspective, from a scientific archaeologic perspective, is so outrageous.
Unbelievable.
There is
What they did underneath me,
there is
but-
material.
stuff
There is
there and
material that was buried in limestone. We will never see it. There was one of the stories which I find mind-boggling. In Gaza, there was a mosaic that was found. It was part of a. It was assumed. It was always assumed that it was part of a church. It showed a curly-haired. They assumed it was a girl. Some people said it was Joan of Arc. Some people said it was one of the saints. A curly-haired figure. And it wasn't until they were able to find more of the parts of it that it was clearly part of a synagogue, and it was a mosaic of King David with his harp as a young boy. And pictures, of course, were taken, thank God. There were pictures taken of it, and it was preserved, at least photographically, because the Arabs absolutely destroyed it. The mosaics were pulled out. It's completely gone. It exists only in the photographic evidence that there was of it.
No, they are 100% for destruction of anything.
We don't know what's happened in Jericho. There had been a synagogue, they used to call it the Shalom Al Yisrael synagogue, because there was a synagogue there with a mosaic, a very beautiful mosaic.
No, when this was put
Gone!
When this was put on fire,
Hmm.
Palestinian cops
Right?
were there and did nothing.
The Israelis allowed, at Joseph's tomb, the Israelis allowed a Druze Israeli soldier to die,
To bleed.
to death, and didn't go in and try to save him, because they would be violating Oslo. I mean, it was like...
Yeah, well, it's it says in Gomorrah, I believe, if you're kind to the cruel, then you'll
eventually
be
be
cruel to the kind.
Right?
And there's no question the Israeli government has proven that. As
They-
people
they-
have said, if this, and I think what we're saying is that you said you feel optimistic. I feel optimistic sometimes because I feel that if it had been only up to the Jews, I don't think we would have made it for 60 years. Somebody else is watching out for it,
Yeah, the one
and as long
above.
as we have him watching out for it, maybe we'll survive. Mr. Hertz, if people want to get the book, how do they do that?
They can go online to Myths and Facts.
mythsandfacts.com
The name-
or
The
.org?
domain is mine.
What is the
I
domain?
registered Myths and Facts.
mythsandfacts.org?
Yeah, I think you can go both. I reserve both. I have both.
mythsandfacts.com also.
Also.
And that's how they can find this book? Is this
No,
book there?
this they can find, I think, only on Amazon now.
Amazon.
Myths and Facts
But
is on
this they can
Amazon.
read by me. On our site.
Reply can be found at mythsandfacts.org or mythsandfacts.com. And when do you expect the new book to be out?
I would say about 6-7 months.
And will that be also on this
400
website?
Yeah. It will be about 450 pages. And it will cover 17 different elements of human rights, religious rights, every facet of possible contact between Israelis and Palestinians.
Yes, this book is downloadable for free.
This is downloadable.
Yeah, the reply book.
Right.
Now.
Can it also be bought as a book if you don't want to just have it?
Yep.
Yes, could you also give us a little insight into your organization, Myths and Facts, who they are, and I understand you're on some various other organizations, APAC, Camera. Could you explain
I'm a
a little
member
what
of.
they are?
He answered that before.
At the beginning?
Yeah,
I wasn't
we
quite
did.
sure if I got
Yeah,
that.
we did. By the way, I was honored by ZOA 2 years ago. Got the Brenda
Sometimes I
Award.
think they're the only group
They
doing
really one of the few who was.
and so is Camera. Camera is
Camera
actually,
works.
Camera
Camera
does
works.
what it says,
I don't know if you
it's
know,
going to
we
do.
have almost 60,000 members. It's a huge number. ZOA is about 30,000. And we count anyone who pays any amount. So you cannot be just count as a member if you didn't pay. So
You have a
to-
dinner coming up.
Yeah, in May, in Dershowitz. We have among them 7,000 approved letter writers. That usually a letter writer would be screened to see who it is, so he's not a hostile guy or penetrated to see what they do. And why is it important? Because almost every day, some of the 7,000 will report articles, TV programs, stuff that is biased against Israel, wrong, not accurate, whatever it is. And immediately we have a group that would write would pick up what's the most important subject, sometimes more than one, write a small write-ups about it, research immediately the phone numbers and fax number and email numbers, how to get to those in charge, and then would blast it to those 7,000 letter writers. And let's assume, I don't know, if 20% of them are doing something, you talk about 1,400 people hitting a station in the Midwest for one day. Their internet doesn't work, they have to read so
Yeah,
many
because they write misinformation and, for the general readership or on television they create documentaries that are not based on fact or slanting.
They took over a Carter book. They did a very good job on Carter books. We published a full page in the New York Times.
Yeah, we had it in our paper too.
And people think that Carter is a nice guy.
New York Times.
I think he is so mad.
Who?
Carter.
Oh, I think Carter.
From Begin.
Begin
was so good, and he didn't care that Carter is the president. He says, I have principle. I have my people I represent.
I think it came from something else. In 1980, when Carter lost to Ronald Reagan, it was an amazing election. 40% of the Jews voted for a Republican.
Unprecedented. He doesn't forget
Unprecedented. I mean, 60% still voted for Carter. We're not pleased.
No, Bush is even worse. So such a little.
No, but I was saying, but Reagan got 40%, and I don't think Carter.
Could forgive it.
I don't think Carter ever got over that. As a matter of fact, my question to Jimmy Carter was, we are a people who have the time-honored reputation for preserving memory. The story about Napoleon finding the Jews. Napoleon came across the Jews on Tisha B'Av, and he heard wailing, crying, and he said, "What's going on here?" And he was told, "Well, they're bemoaning the loss of their temple." And he said, "Well, when was it destroyed?" And they said, "About 2,000 years ago." And he said, there is a fine future for people with that kind of a historic memory. And what my question to Jimmy Carter was, does it bother you that now for time immemorial, your legacy for these people with this kind of a historic memory as we have, you will be remembered as an anti-Semite? I'm not saying it's true. I'm not going to get into an argument with ADL whether it's true or not true. I'm talking about now what the perception of Jimmy Carter will be for the Jewish people, what they will teach their children, and what the legacy will be.
It wasn't that much of a legacy for the American people in general.
There was no legacy, but now his legacy among the... What's amazing is that many of us who said in 1980, I'm voting for Ronald Reagan because Jimmy Carter is an anti-Semite, and people said, "Oh my goodness, you can't say..." My goodness, look at that! We were proven to be right! Oh, Lord.
He had bad guys. Brzezinski, right?
Brzezinski
was really an anti-Jewish.
Certainly were allergic to the idea of a Jewish state. As I think that's the way they talk about Bush and Baker.
Yeah, they don't have to be brutal. They don't have to be vocal. They just lack the foreign aid, or they just don't supply spare parts for stuff.
Spare parts of the
yeah, and then the one thing is that they're nice people,
And then you have the Israelis who, at the idea that Americans are not fawning over them becomes very frightening.
What is AIPAC? Run this AIPAC.
The lobby.
You don't
Jewish
know
lobby.
The American.
That's why I asked.
Oh.
It is the
it was
Jewish
stated
lobby.
before that you were a member, but I didn't know what those
It's American
organizations.
Israel Public Affairs Committee, and this is the lobby.
The Israeli.
Jewish lobby.
You're on this.
Yeah, I'm on the executive board. It's actually 20 years this year.
We laugh. We say depending on what's going on, whether AIPAC can be counted on or can't be counted on.
It is the most important organization, no question about it. And people say.
I would have liked to have seen them standing stronger behind their people. Their people, Ken and.
Oh, these guys, yeah. look, I'll tell you, this FBI made a job on them, on everyone, and they were afraid because if they wouldn't go along,
I had no problem with them going along, but
it
they should have
could,
stood behind
screw
them.
them.
I'm not telling
No,
anybody
the
not to
No,
cooperate.
the FBI said to them, you don't support them, you don't give them money, you don't give them anything. The FBI said, you want us to assume that it's two different
Then that should,
issues,
then,
and you are not the problem, then you cannot have anything.
then what they should have done is they should have made that public.
The problem is,
They should have said,
donors
they
should have got together. They say, you know what, we will take care of them on the account that we will give you less. APEC.
That's right.
APEC gets a lot of money. APEC gets like 45 or 50
There
million
should have
dollars
been
now.
that, and there should have been, and there should have been
Yeah.
a generalized,
Yeah.
there should have been
We
some.
did a small this, but you can't. You need continuously to do it. It's two families, kids,
How are
and
these,
everything.
how are these families going to make this? How are
Even
they,
there, people are giving the money.
are they being
Yeah.
screwed?
So I don't think
At the end of the
full
game,
effect.
At the end of the game, they're going to be exonerated, because they didn't
I
do
hope,
anything.
then I hope they can sue this APEC just to get some money. Not the APEC is very good. It is the #1 organization. It's nothing like
Will,
this.
will AIPAC give them money?
I think APEC would be willing to lose to them. You know what I'm saying? But now they can't afford to even touch them and be next to them. It has to be done, finished with in the law, in the court. And then
My understanding from reading the court is that the judge has virtually clamored on top of the government. It looks to me like there's.
it's very strange, you're right, but who knows what it can do? But you see this Libby now and all this stuff, I mean, it's so,
Libby's gonna
that's
also.
that's the job of a lobbyist in the government when you deal. And you
They
pick
didn't
up-
even, I mean,
you
what
pick
they
up
were
a law
accusing,
from when?
what they were,
From 1900?
no, it wasn't, what they were accusing them of is impossible.
Spying.
But they were given information, I mean, it was impossible,
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, it's
So-
just like Libby. It's they, and quite a lot of all these they highly politicized things.
The only
that
problem,
are-
the only thing Libby has going is that if they find Libby guilty, he'll get an immediate presidential pardon.
Probably.
And Bush doesn't have to face the people again.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter what he does.
So you're the chairman. I'm being facetious here of the Jewish lobby.
No, no,
You-
no,
you're
no,
the,
no,
No.
the elder of the. I finally met the elder of the protocols of.
No, he's on the.
I'm the chairman of camera, but just a member of the executive board.
So is there truly you're trying to take over the world? You know, there are these
I'm
protocols.
He'd
in
like,
the-
I'm
he'd
trying
like
to
Israel to
extend-
exist.
And I'm trying to extend 24 hours to 35, so we can do all those things.
Yes.
Do you receive our paper, the
No.
Jewish Voice?
No, but I'll leave you a card, and
We'll
if
put
you
you
give
on.
me your card, I'll give you.
Here, I'll
mine.
give you a copy of the paper.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.